building a couple of shallows for our seeds. I'm gonna finish this one, and then I'm gonna take my stuff, go in the other room, and give Holly some room so she can start setting up the seeds.
Welcome back to the channel. We are in growing zone 6A, which means it is time for us to start planting some of our seedlings. It's mid-February right now, and our weather is all over the place. Today was 12 degrees Celsius. Some of our tulips have already started to come up out of the ground, but next week we are supposed to get down around minus 15 degrees Celsius. We do have buckets tapped out front, so the sap is flowing here. Up at the cabin, we are nowhere near ready to start sap. And if we were living up there, we would not even be close to starting seedlings because I think the growing zone up there is 4B. Luckily for us at home, it is significantly warmer. We are 2 hours south of the cabin, and that means it is time to start planting some of our seeds. So we have no garden space at this house yet, so this year is going to be starting completely from scratch. When it comes to planting seedlings, you really need to know what growing zone you're in, and most importantly, what it is that you want to grow. Now we're in growing zone 6A, so there's a wide variety of things we can be starting right now, but just because we're in a growing zone where we can grow a whole bunch of stuff or start growing things right now, doesn't mean that that makes sense for us. When it comes to growing your own food and starting seedlings, one of the most important things you need to remember is, what will my family eat? There's no sense in growing things that your family won't eat because otherwise you're just wasting time and energy trying to grow things for no reason. And I know for me, when I first started growing food, I just wanted to grow everything. So I didn't really put any thought into what I was doing. At this stage of gardening for me, I put a lot of thought into what I'm doing now. I only plant things that me and my family will eat, and I only plant enough of what we need for ourselves. There's no sense in planting a million beets if we don't even eat beets, or we're only gonna eat 3 beets. So it is important to think about what is gonna make sense for you and your family when you start planting your seedlings in the winter. So let me show you what we're gonna be starting today. I get my seeds from OSC Seeds. No, I have no affiliation with them. That's just the place that I like to get my seeds from. So I planted my garden early January, and I already knew what I needed to order. I did an inventory of what I had left over from last season, and then I calculated what I needed to order for this season. Now, because we moved and we have no gardens here, we are planning on expanding our garden significantly from the one that we had last year. The garden that we had last year was big, but this one is going to be bigger. So let's get into what it is that we're gonna be planting. One of the first things that I'm gonna be starting indoors is cabbage. Now I'm gonna be doing a green cabbage and a purple cabbage. We have not had great success with cabbage in the past. We got overrun with bugs in our cabbage last year. So this year we are gonna be putting some netting up, which hopefully will help us have a better yield with our cabbage. Cabbage is something that needs to be started indoors approximately 5 to 6 weeks before your last frost. So it is a perfect time for us to start planting cabbage indoors right now. Another thing we're gonna be planting today is broccoli. Now, we have had terrible luck with broccoli. I shouldn't say terrible luck because it's actually grown. The thing is I seem to never be able to get to it before it starts to bolt. So this year I do plan to be paying a lot more attention to the broccoli and giving it more of what it needs so that we are able to actually get something off the plant and the effort that we've put into it. The next thing we're gonna get started today is celery. Now last year was the first time that I ever planted celery and it was successful, and we had huge, beautiful stalks of celery. So this year, celery is something that I will definitely be giving my attention to. Another thing we're gonna be growing this year is beets. I am not a huge beet fan. However, I am going to be growing some beets for my mom because my mom does not have a garden at home, and I know that she does like beets, so I'm going to be growing some beets for her this year. I'm also going to be growing them because I want to try pickled beets. There are vegetables that me and the kids don't like, but when they're pickled, we do. So I'm hoping the pickled beets kind of go the same way, and we can add one more thing to our shelf for the winter. Now is also a great time for us to start doing leeks and onions. These are my leftover onion seeds from last year, which is why they're in this funky little container. Leeks was another thing that I planted last year for the first time and had success with. And it also had the same ending as the celery. We moved and I forgot to pick them all, and I took a lot of time into researching leeks and how to grow them and what they need and what kind of soil they need and what kind of fertilizer they need. And the fact that they actually grew and produced, I was ecstatic. But then of course we left them behind. So this year leeks and onions are gonna be getting a lot of my attention because we ended up with none last year. The next thing we're gonna get started today is rosemary. I started growing all my own herbs, I think 2 to 3 years ago, and I stopped buying herbs from the grocery store completely. Usually our plants are producing so much that I have to cut them down multiple times through the year and start dehydrating them because we can't even go through as many as we're producing. This year I plan to add more herbs to the garden and dehydrate more of them so that we're completely covered for the winter. On top of growing things and dehydrating them for us, I'm gonna try and harvest one of these plants from the garden at the end of the season and bring it inside and see if we can keep it alive in the window over the winter. And lastly, we're gonna be starting some flowers. So last year was the first year that I started growing my own flowers. Normally I buy them from a nursery, the little shoots, and then I just plant them. But last year I decided that if I'm planting my own vegetables and seedlings, why wouldn't I just start my own flowers? So we did marigolds and morning glories last year from seed, and they turned out amazing. They actually were the biggest marigold plants I've ever had. This year we're going to be adding more flowers to our garden that we've started from seed. Now that we've got our seeds out and ready to go, I'm going to put the rest of this stuff away. There are tons more seeds in this box, but we are not even going to get into those today because these don't need to be planted until at least March. Some are April, and some of them are going to be direct sow, so we don't even need to touch these right now. I picked up these trays from the store the other day, and they are 72 cells in a container. So each cell will get a seed, and then each seed will hopefully grow a plant, and then once they get bigger, we'll transplant them into bigger cups. But I like to start my seeds in these trays because they take up a lot less space. When I'm doing onions and leeks, I still use these trays, but what I do is I take the insert itself out and I fill this tray up with dirt and plant the onions and the leeks directly in these containers. And then as they grow, I start to thin them out, and once they get a little bit bigger, then I transplant them into bigger cups. I find this to be the easiest way to do leeks and onions because the seeds are so small, and if you spill them out of line and they kind of go all over the place, that's okay because you're going to be thinning them out anyways. You can leave the cell insert inside the tray and plant them directly into these little inserts if you want. I personally just like to plant them in the tray, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Before last year, I never really put too much thought into the type of soil I was starting my seedlings in, and that was a big mistake. I found when I was starting my seeds inside that some of the soil was getting moldy on top, and I was having bad luck with germination and just the overall health of the seedling as it was growing. Last year I switched to a premium pro mix, and I get it from the feed store where I get all the animals' food. And I used it last year, and we had an amazing result with the germination of our seedlings and just the overall health of the plant when they got transplanted later on. So I went with the exact same type of soil this year, which is a premium pro mix brown medium. So it's got a little bit of everything in it. When I'm starting my seeds indoors, I do not add fertilizer or anything extra to the soil. I just use the soil that comes in the bag as it is. I dampen it and add my seeds. Fertilizer and all that extra stuff is gonna come later when they get transplanted outside. But for now, I'm just gonna be putting the seed directly in the soil and watering it and putting it under the grow lights and letting it do its business. Sometimes I just take the seeds and sprinkle them all over the soil, and then as they grow, I thin them out, which is I think what I'm gonna do today. The onions I'm planting today are just a standard yellow onion. So I'm just gonna sprinkle the onion seeds right into the soil, and then I'm gonna spray them with water, and then I'll cover it with another thin layer of soil, and it's ready to go under the grow lights. Growing your own food can seem a bit intimidating sometimes, but it really just requires a bit of patience and a bit of time. Once I started taking gardening a lot more seriously and planning a lot more, I spent some time researching in the winter about each plant that I wanted to grow, and I looked up basically everything about the plant. What kind of soil it needed, what kind of fertilizer it needed, did it need to be planted in the shade or in the sun, what are things that it should be planted next to, what are things that it should not be planted next to, basically everything that I could find about each of the plants I was growing. Next up is the leeks. I'm going to take the insert out, and I'm just going to fill this tray up with dirt. If you want to grow food, you can grow food exactly where you are right now. You don't have to have property to grow food. You don't have to have a backyard to grow food. In fact, you don't even have to have a balcony to grow food. Just a windowsill will do. Obviously, you can't grow everything inside without a backyard or a balcony or something, but you can definitely start growing stuff where you are right now. Potatoes are something that can be grown in a bucket on a balcony. Tomatoes can be grown in a bucket. In fact, you can grow herbs and lettuce year-round under grow lights inside your house in the living room if you want. Last winter, we grew herbs inside and lettuce inside over the winter. The only reason we didn't do it this year is because we just moved at the end of the season and everything was packed away and we were not prepared to be growing anything when we moved here. My tray is full of soil and water and it is ready to start adding the leeks. So I'm going to be doing the leeks the same way that I did the onions, and I'm just going to sprinkle them across the soil, and then I'm going to cover them up with another thin layer of soil and some water, and then I'll put them under the grow lights. As they start to grow, I'll do the same thing as with the onions, and I'll just thin them out if they're too close together. It's important to thin out your plants for a few reasons. One, they're not going to grow very well when they're all stuck together. Two, if they do all grow when they're that close together, you're going to get very weak plants. They won't get very hardy. If you plant them this close together and you don't thin them out, you're never going to be able to separate them when it comes time to transplanting them. So thinning out your plants is important. And that goes the same for if you're planting directly in the ground. So when it comes to carrots or lettuce, when you plant directly in the ground, it is important that you thin them out. All of your carrot seeds might germinate and you might get a whole bunch of carrots. But when you pull your carrots out of the ground, they're going to be extremely thin and probably really short. So thinning your plants is beneficial for a lot of reasons. That tray is done. I'll just give it a little spray with water, and then it's also ready to go under the grow lights. We don't eat a lot of cabbage, but I am growing it because I want to do sauerkraut this year. We use it for cabbage rolls and we use it for cabbage salad, so it will get used regardless. But I want to try sauerkraut this year so that we have something else to add to the shelf for the winter, which is why I'm going to be planting a little bit more cabbage than I normally would. In previous years, we planted probably around maybe 8 cabbage or so. This year, I'm probably going to be doing, I'm thinking 20. So I'll do probably 10 of the green and 10 of the purple cabbage. Because it's my first year doing sauerkraut, I don't want to get carried away with cabbage, because if it all grows properly, I'm going to end up with a ridiculous amount of cabbage if I don't have a plant for it. There's tons of different varieties of cabbage, but I'm going with a Danish ball head for the green one and a red express for the purple cabbage. These are the seeds we had left over from last season, which is why I'm using them. There's more than enough in here, so I didn't order any new ones this year. Doing seed inventory is really important because it helps you save money by not ordering stuff that you don't need. I will admit I was pretty bad with that before, and I would end up with too many seeds, and then they would expire and they'd end up getting wasted. So each year now, I always do an inventory on what we need. I think about what it is that we're going to be planting, and then if I have enough, I don't even bother ordering seeds. So what I'm doing now is I'm just putting 2 seeds in each cell. You don't have to put 2 seeds in each cell. I do just in case one doesn't germinate. If they both germinate, like I said, we just thin them out and we pull out the weakest one and we leave the strongest one in there. But if we don't put 2 in and then the seed that I do put in doesn't germinate, I've just wasted the cell in my tray. So I've got my green cabbage seeds in, and now I'm going to start putting in my purple cabbage. The next thing we're going to add in here is broccoli. Again, I have these seeds left over from last year because I ordered broccoli seeds, not realizing that I still had a full pack left. So thankfully I didn't have to buy any this year. So I'm going to go ahead and plant 16 broccoli. And the reason I'm only planting 16 is because I've had horrible luck with broccoli in the past. And I don't want to take up too much space in my tray with something that I'm not very good at growing yet. If for some reason all 16 of them do grow, then that's perfect because that'll be enough for us to have a few fresh ones during the summer and then also put some in the freezer for the winter. So I'm just doing the same thing with my broccoli seeds and just adding 2 of each seed to each cell. So that's it for broccoli. And now we can move on to rosemary. Rosemary is something that we use a lot of. It's probably one of my favorite herbs. Rosemary and basil are probably my 2 favorite herbs to grow. I love rosemary for a variety of reasons. It smells amazing. It tastes so good fresh. But when we dehydrate this for the winter, it has more flavor than any rosemary I've ever found at the store. So I'm planting a little bit extra this year because I want to make sure that we have more than enough for the winter. So I'm going to go ahead and plant probably about 18 to 20 rosemary. Sometimes I find growing herbs to be difficult. Parsley is no problem, but for some reason growing thyme and oregano, rosemary, and basil, they've been a little bit difficult for me. Last year was the first year that we started using grow lights, and I found that since using the grow lights, my seedlings have been exponentially stronger going outside. Before, we just used to use cups and put them in the window, which works, but they do tend to get a little bit long and leggy and a little bit flimsy, and then they don't do so well when we transplant them outside. So cabbage is in, broccoli is in, rosemary's in, and now it's time to do the celery and the beets, and then just a couple flowers, and we're done. I think I'll finish this tray of beets. That'll give me 18, and I think 18 is more than enough for us, considering I'm not a huge beet fan, and I don't know if I'm gonna like these pickled or not. So I'm gonna do 18. Beets are also something that you can direct sow early in the season. Like as soon as the soil is workable, you can basically plant beets. The only reason I'm starting them inside is so that they have a bit of a head start when it's time to plant outside. But if these do turn out and I do like them, then I'll probably plant some more outside once we actually start working the soil outside. Okay, so that's it for the beets, and it's time to cover the top of the tray. Actually, it's time to spray them with water and then cover the top of the tray. You can basically use the same method for almost every single seed you want to start planting inside. So think about what it is that you and your family are gonna eat, what makes sense to plant, how much is appropriate to plant for you and your family. You can pretty much apply that to anything that you're growing. I like to use a spray bottle when I'm watering my seeds because I find that if you use something and pour it, for example, if I took the lid off here and poured right out of the bottle, the stream is so thick that it will poke holes in your dirt and you might lose your seeds or just completely drown them altogether. So I like to use a spray bottle on top because it just lightly dampens the soil, and then when the seeds start to come up, the leaves of the seeds, they like the water. The bulk of the stuff we plant is normally a direct sow, which means it's going directly into the dirt outside and we're not starting it inside. So what I mean by that is we eat a lot of lettuce, so that goes directly into the ground. That's not something we start inside. We like to have a lot of carrots. That is also something that gets put directly into the ground and does not get started inside. Corn is another thing, directly into the ground outside. Beans, peas, sometimes I start cucumbers inside, but most of the time they go directly into the ground. Parsley is something I start directly outside. Potatoes start outside. The bulk of the stuff that we eat and the bulk of the stuff that we grow usually gets planted outside. The stuff that I start inside are things that take a little bit longer to grow. Celery, broccoli, cauliflower if we're doing it. Some herbs need to be started inside, rosemary, thyme, oregano. Those are things you can start outside, but I like to start them inside just to make sure that they're nice and healthy and make it through the season. So I'm just gonna use these little spoons and I'm gonna write on the back of them so I know what it is that I planted. It doesn't look like it, but that is 72 plants, which is more than enough of the things that I planted that we need. The beets are just a trial, so that's probably enough for us too. And as for the onions and leeks, once these start growing, there's gonna be hundreds in here. So I'll just pick out the strongest ones, and those are the ones that I'll transplant and let them get bigger. So we're almost done. The next thing we have to do is the celery, and I'm gonna be using this tray for that. And then after that, we just have flowers to do, and we're done. So this little tray holds 36 cells. I know it sounds like a lot, but in the past, I've had a really hard time germinating celery, and I really want this to work this year. So I'm gonna be planting this whole tray of celery, and if it grows, great. And if it doesn't and only some grows, then at least we still have some. If you've ever planted celery before, you'll know that these seeds are microscopic. They are so small that they're very difficult to handle. And that's another reason you thin out your plants, is because I'm dropping way more in these holes than I need to be dropping. And they're so small that I can't separate them to plant them properly in the cell. Okay, that's it for the celery. Last but not least, it is time for the flowers. Doesn't feel like there's a lot of seeds in these packets, so I probably don't need the whole tray. So I think what I'm gonna do is just fill dirt up on half only. I would love to have a greenhouse one day that was specific just to flowers and grow tons of flowers. That would be ideal. It's definitely on my list of things, probably not for this season, maybe for next season. So it's time to start adding the seeds, and I think I'm gonna start with the foxglove. This is not something I've ever grown before. I actually don't even know what the seeds look like. Oh my gosh, they're even smaller than celery seeds, if you can believe that. I don't have good luck with the seeds that are that small because I tend to spill them and end up with way too many in each cell. But like I said, we can just thin them out and it'll be fine. That's it for the foxglove, and now I'm going to plant the forget-me-nots. I don't really know a lot about flowers. It's definitely something that I need to educate myself on more. So I'll make that a priority probably for next winter. I do want to get better at flowers for a bunch of reasons, but because we have bees, I like to make sure that the bees have more than enough of what they need. We do plant sunflowers, but that's not until way later, and they get planted directly into the ground. Okay, so we have all of our seeds planted for this round. Like I said, later on, around beginning of March, that's when I'm going to start planting my next round of stuff. Mid-March, I think there's another round that needs to be planted. And by mid-April, everything that needs to be started indoors will already be started. And anything not started indoors by mid-April is something that's going to be direct sowed. Now that our seeds are done, I'm going to bring in those racks that Jeff was building. I'm going to attach the grow lights to them, and then I'm going to put my trays underneath. For anyone that's new here, our house is 123 years old, which means the electrical outlets are extremely limited in this house, which is why we have our growing racks in our dining room. These black racks are something we just picked up from Home Depot. We like to use these because they're lightweight, and then we can suspend our grow lights from them. So these strip lights we got off Amazon, and they're LED grow lights. So I'll drop the link in the description below if you're looking for any lights. So Jeff built these little frames out of wood last season. You can see that in one of our other videos on starting our seedlings. But basically he made these frames, zip tied the lights onto them, and then we've got these little hooks on the corner that we tie string from, and then we suspend them from the top of the rack. Then we can shorten the string as the plant starts growing and raise it up. The light needs to be relatively close to the tray when the seeds are first starting to grow, because if you have your light way up high, they're going to grow long and leggy because they're going to be trying to reach the light. So we always start our lights down low, and then as the seeds start growing, then I raise it up. I'm just using regular cotton string, and I'm going to get started on tying these up here so that we can get our seeds under them. So we got the racks of lighting on, and they're on strings right now. So like I said, we can adjust them as the plants start to grow. But for now, they're at a good height to slide the trays underneath. And then probably in a few weeks, we'll just raise them up as the seeds start to sprout. But now that the lights are on the rack, it's time to put the seeds under them. So there you have it. That's how to start seeds indoors. It might seem overwhelming, or that might have seemed like a lot of information, but it's really not as much work as it seems. All you really need to do is pick out the things that you and your family will eat, decide how much you want to plant, hang some grow lights, and water the seeds. And that's really all there is to it. All we need to do now is just periodically water these and raise up the lights as the seeds start to grow. These seeds are going to be in here for a long time because we still have frost for another 5 to 6 weeks. The real maintenance when it comes to gardening is the attention they need outdoors, so the fertilizer, the regular watering, the weeding, and that kind of stuff. But starting seeds indoors is really not that much work. You also do not need to use racks with grow lights. The only reason we switched to racks with grow lights is for efficiency and because we can fit more trays underneath the grow lights than we could fit cups in the window. As we're expanding our gardens and our homestead, it only made sense for us because later this year, we are also adding a market garden to our house. We are going to be doubling up on most of the stuff that we're producing. Not so much this stuff, but definitely the stuff like lettuce, tomatoes, carrots, cucumbers, and that kind of stuff that gets planted outside. That's also why we planted so much garlic last season. If you watched our video on planting garlic, we planted almost 600 cloves of garlic this year, which is 500 more than we planted last year. I won't get into too much about market gardening because that's a completely separate topic, but for now, this video was just to show you how to start your seeds indoors, and this is really all there is to it. Pick out your seeds, grab some soil, hang some grow lights, or put them in solo cups in the window, and that's it. Water them, and they're gonna do the rest. Growing food for you and your family is not as overwhelming as it seems. Just stick to the things that you and your family eat and it's gonna be a whole lot easier. That's it for this video. Make sure you follow us on Instagram so you can stay in the loop on how our seedlings are doing and what we're up to on a regular basis. So thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.